Hi, my name is Allie Woodburn. I'm currently a junior at Alma College, majoring in speech and language pathology, and this is my screencast on assessment. Criterion referenced assessments are designed to measure student performance against a fixed set of criteria or learning standards. The Brugance is an example of the criterion referenced assessment. We will be looking at the results of the Brugance mathematics assessment given to a 7th grade student. The directions for assessment lines ensure that all students receive the exact same set of instructions. Students will need 80% accuracy to be classified as proficient at that specific grade level. As shown on the first grade placement test, the student demonstrated 100% correct answers, meeting proficiency, and is able to test at the next level. At the second grade level, the student answered 2 questions incorrectly, as recorded in the skill and analysis and answers. However, the student still meets 80% proficiency and is able to advance. At the third grade level, the student missed 9 points when only 5 missed answers are allowed for 80% accuracy. In this case, I made some notes in specific areas that the student should review and advance to the next level to test for proficiency. This process was repeated at the 4th grade level, as the student was unable to correctly answer enough questions to demonstrate proficiency. This growth graph shows the data that we just looked at while explaining the procedure of the Brugance math grade placement. The Brugance math assessment administered on March 19, 2014 shows that this student was proficient through the upper 2nd grade level, as denoted by the pink. On March 27, 2014, the Brugance reading comprehension assessment was administered. The student was proficient through the upper 4th grade level. The results of this assessment are useful for planning instruction because it allows the teacher to gain an overall sense of what the students have learned and where the gaps are. Under my teacher notes on formative and summative assessment, I noted that the student needs work on subtracting fractions and converting mixed numbers to improper fractions. I also noted some recent events and behavioral tendencies that may have affected the student's overall score. These external performance factors are also important to keep in mind when planning instruction. Formative assessments help to monitor student learning and provide ongoing feedback that can be used to help improve instruction and help students improve their learning. Oftentimes, formative assessments help students to identify their strengths and weaknesses, help teachers to recognize problem spots, and are low stakes, meaning that they're of low or no point value. The following are some examples of formative assessment. The postcard summary asks students to write a personal postcard to their best friend, explaining what they learned today. The postcard summary can also be used to collect questions about the lesson or as a ticket out the door. It is suggested that this method be used after a PowerPoint or Prezi presentation. 3 important points ask students to summarize their learning using the triangular outline, with the topic being studied written in the middle of the triangle. The graphic organizer asks students to create an organizer of their choosing, using illustrations, words, or symbols. This is a good one to use after reading an article or teaching a long mathematical process like division. The goal of summative assessment is to evaluate student learning at the end of an instructional unit by comparing it against some standard or benchmark. Summative assessments are often high stakes, which means that they have a high point value. The Yates Final Exam is an example of a summative assessment. This exam is 5 pages long and tests over information taught throughout the semester or year. Triangulation for evaluation means that in order to determine the grade equivalency of a particular student, all 3 points must be taken into consideration: formative and summative assessments, assessment notes, and observation conversation tools. For example, the student may be able to demonstrate the correct procedure for solving improper fractions in class, but may test at a lower level than what they are demonstrating, or vice versa. A student may have guessed several right answers on a standardized assessment and is unable to demonstrate this knowledge in an informal setting. Above the evaluation triangulation, I've recorded the students' Brugance math and reading comprehension grade equivalencies and the dates that the assessments were given. The following is a lesson that demonstrates individualized instruction. Here I'm working with an 8th grade student on long division, and in order to help him remember the process better, we're trying to come up with a story, something that he can visualize, and something that's interesting and meaningful to him. In this case, we're using hunting as the theme of our story. We say that a deer comes over and knocks the 8 onto the ground with his antlers, giving us the format for our long division problem. And this kind of helps him to visualize the first step. We then ask how many times do 3 deer go into 8 deer, and using that image we come up with 2. We perform the simple subtraction and derive the answer, 2 over 2, and the original fraction 3, 2/3. Next, we're going to be looking at converting a mixed number back into an improper fraction. And we're going to stick with the theme of hunting, but use a slightly different story. For this next problem, we're going to be thinking about bows and arrows. In this case, we start with the multiplication and we say 2 arrows times 3 arrows will give us how many arrows? You can use this process for any type of improper fraction mixed number problem. So we figure out we have 6 arrows. We say those 6 arrows were shot to the top of the hill, and they find 2 more arrows up there, or however many arrows or whatever that number is on top. We do the addition, 6 plus 2, we get 8 arrows on top of the hill, so that's going to be the numerator of our fraction. And then we agree that it's always set over the original number, which in this case is 3. And we come up with our improper fraction. Hopefully using this story will help our student to better remember and retain the process of long division. I thought that this article offered great ideas for accommodations and strategies for students with reading disabilities, and insight into the emotional and academic insecurities the students may be experiencing. In this presentation, I have taken what were some of the most interesting and helpful pointers for myself and have expanded upon them using some class connections. When looking at reading disorders dealing with comprehension, 2 general methods are suggested. 1, place the student into a unique and independent reading program, and 2, intervene and accommodate their current reading program. In our class, we've discussed response to intervention, which is giving students the accommodations that they need early on, and the importance of individualizing instruction, so students are given adequate time to process, practice, and be successful in their reading. We've experienced this in our math class too, during placement. Sometimes you have to sit back, be patient, and wait for the student to process the information. You don't want to be moving at a pace that's too fast or too slow for either student. Homework. The workload must be doable for a student with a learning disability. The student has to work on retaining the information, figuring out the assignment, and then finally completing the task, when a typical student just has to read the instructions and complete the work. Teachers come up with some strategies and accommodations that make the workload less stressful for the student. Some of these strategies and accommodations may include reading the material aloud, repeating key points, highlighting, extending time, reducing homework like we just talked about, the buddy system, having some peer support, audios, books on tape, small group instruction. All of these can help to lessen the workload for the students. We've touched on many of these strategies in class already. For example, it's important to keep in mind when making a screencast for the class to pace it correctly. If the instructions are too quick, the students will not have enough time to process the information and feel frustrated with the assignment. We've practiced many of these in class too. We've highlighted our study guides, we've read them aloud together, and we've made sure to pace correctly our videos to our students, teaching mixed numbers, improper fractions. So these are all things that we're working on and all things that we should be constantly keeping in mind. Assessment is another thing we've talked a lot about. Standardized diagnostic tests through observation, analyzing student work, informal, formal, group, and individualized tests. More than one assessment can be used for accuracy. Because if only one type of test is used, there could be inaccuracies due to advantages and disadvantages of each type of assessment. And we must give the students time, like we talked about in our previous slide, time to incorporate all of these great strategies through instruction and practice of basic skills. So, testing for accuracy using several different types of assessments does relate back to triangulation. You can't rely on just one type of test to completely define where a student is at. The student could test at a second grade level on the Brigance, but actually be reading at a fourth grade level. We have to make sure that we're observing in class too. We've also emphasized in class and placement that sometimes you may just be watching or waiting for a student, like we said before, to process the information. It's our job to wait patiently, explain when needed, and wait till it is clicked. In conclusion, I feel that I've become better able to apply some of these textbook terms like criterion referenced, formative and summative assessment, individualized instruction, and triangulation to real-life situations. I feel like I'm better understanding the importance of establishing a trusting, healthy relationship with the students and their parents. This is important for parental involvement, parent trust, student willingness to work. Like I said here, IEP goals, objectives, accommodations, and other related services cannot be carried out without the support of the parent and the willingness of the student. I really hope to successfully apply some of these practices to my instruction.